Welcome to tonight's talk. My name is Mark Smith. I am the Executive Director of the Mary May Binney Wakefield Arboretum in Milton, Massachusetts, and we are one of a number of organizations that have formed what we're calling the Blue Hills Climate Action Coalition. Just reading the members of the coalition, which folks can see actually in front of them. I really don't need to read all of them. But we are a new coalition, and we're the host of tonight's talk. Before we get going, just a few housekeeping issues for questions, and you can ask a question at any time during the talk tonight. We'd like you to put the question in the Q&A tab at the bottom of your screen. You'll see a Q&A. That's where you add your questions. If you have any logistical issues with the production of tonight's lecture, send a note via the chat room. That will go to the folks backing up us with the technical aspects, and they can help you. Hopefully it can help you with any need you might have. Tonight's talk is the second of the series. We'll go all the way through the end of April, every other Thursday night. And at the end of the conversation tonight, I will talk about the next talk 2 weeks from tonight. So I'm going to turn it over right now to Laura Beebe of Friends of the Blue Hills, who will introduce tonight's talk. Laura.
Great. Thank you, Mark. Hi, everyone, and good evening. Thank you for being here with us. I'm Laura Beebe, Friends of the Blue Hills board member, and I'm delighted to introduce Kathy Smith and Sara Rostampour of Brookwood Community Farm. Kathy Smith has been a member of Brookwood Community Farm since 2007. She joined the farm's board in 2008 and became president in late 2017. Her concern for the source of food comes from farm work as a young adult, raising her children, and her love of the outdoors. The driving force behind Kathy's work is the sustainability of Brookwood Community Farm. Brookwood's farm manager, Sara Rostampour, worked as a Spanish-speaking nutrition educator for the WIC program in Minneapolis before deciding to shift her focus from eating vegetables to growing them. She has a Master of Science degree in horticulture with an emphasis on vegetable production from Cornell University, and has worked on farms ranging from under 1 acre to nearly 30 acres. Her favorite things about farming at Brookwood are the inclusive community and having the space to teach and grow aspiring farmers' abilities, especially in the mechanical realm. She thinks the most beautiful vegetables Brookwood grows are celeriac, kohlrabi, and fennel, but also has a soft spot in her heart for the unsung turnip and rutabaga. All right, so just a reminder about using the Q&A for questions, but Sara and Kathy, thank you so much.
Thank you, Laura. I'm happy to be here tonight to represent the board of directors of Brookwood Community Farm. Brookwood, you might not know, was co-founded in 2006 by Judy Lieberman and Mark Smith. It started out as a 1-year, 1 acre agreement with the DCR at this public property called Brookwood Farm. It's located at the base of the Blue Hills, and it straddles the line between Milton and Canton. So we continue to farm on a portion of this property through a permit from the DCR, and we also use land over at the Bradley Estate, which is a trustees of reservation property. So a ton of goodwill and sweat equity by Judy, Mark, and many of their friends and acquaintances got this community farm going and kept it going. Mark retired from the board in 2017 and Judy in 2015, but both continue to actively support the farm. Currently, the 2021 season, our 16th, is underway with seed starting, which began just a couple days ago by staff with volunteer help. And our CSA sales began in December and are getting closer to selling out every day. So Brookwood is growing organically and following the Northeast Organic Farmers Pledge. And we also function as a nonprofit. Our mission is to improve access to healthy, locally produced food. We do our best to provide affordable or fully funded shares, along with the regular shares that maybe some of you already have for 2021. And as needed, SNAP shares, where the members might take their benefits and sign up to get a share every other week for pretty much the whole season. And they are able to take advantage of the Massachusetts Healthy Incentive Program if they use their SNAP dollars up to a certain amount. that amount of money is put right back in their account so that their funds can be continued to be used for other groceries and other needs in their family. We also send out food donations into the community 5 days a week. And last year it was to 7 different places, food pantries, Rosie's Place. In the end of the season, even some of the, like a local fridge operation, Dorchester Fridge. And the value of the donations, even in 2020, were over $35,000 worth of food. So a lot of good food is getting to a lot of different people. Over the past few years, we've developed a farm stand right on the property. So this public property is the host to a farm stand that over the years has just developed into a place to find more and more awesome stuff. And so this is public access and another place where people can use their EBT to get fresh vegetables. So we are thankful to have Sara as our farm manager since early 2018. So this is her 4th growing season at the farm, where she has developed a strong team of people that produce the food and flowers that grace many people's lives. So I don't want to eat up any more of time because Sara has some awesome information about farming and ideas about how that relates to the climate. Thank you.
Okay, hi, thanks, Kathy. So I'm going to talk about how the farm, not how it's dealing with climate change so much. If anyone has questions, I can talk about that. But I think people are more, climate action. I focus more on the end of what are we doing that is in line with people, the values of people concerned with climate change. So more focused on that. But I can certainly answer questions about how we deal with the weather and that sort of thing. So I'm going to touch on the kind of the biggest ways that agriculture makes a difference as far as climate change happening. And the biggest things that come to mind for me are fossil fuel use, soil carbon, land use is a big one that comes up, and then food waste. So I'm going to go over those things, and then there'll be plenty of time for questions, of course. So as far as fossil fuel use, first of all, sometimes people are concerned, we use tractors to be more efficient, but I ran the calculations and the amount of fuel we're using to power the tractors isn't that much. Also, because we're organic, we're not using petroleum-based fertilizer, and we have very minimal use of pesticides. When we do use it, it's organic ones only when it's absolutely needed. Those are major inputs in a conventional system that don't always get thought about. Nitrogen is a huge energy user. And what we're using is either mainly regional composted poultry manure. So that's an organic source. Also, cover crops is a source of fertilizer that we're growing, as well as some compost use. So that's some source of fossil fuel use that people don't always think about. Tractors are limited compared to transportation to the farm. And actually, before COVID happened, I was talking with people hoping that we could get improved public transportation to the farm. And obviously that's sort of out of our hands at this point, but it is something on my mind. There are some people that bike, but it's obviously not the vast majority. But I think thinking broadly, it is good that the food isn't being trucked from far away to here. If we can find more sustainable ways to get people to the farm, I'll admit that's something I wish that, or I hope that we can improve on. Not specifically for Brookwood, but it's kind of a Boston Metro issue. How can we have people moving around in more sustainable ways to reduce fossil fuel use? So that's one part of it. Another big thing is keeping, basically all soils have a capacity for carbon. We want soil carbon that can be in the soil to stay in the soil. We don't want it up there because that concentration of carbon in the atmosphere affects climate change. And what that means is for your soil, you want really high organic matter. And I'll say that when I came to Brookwood Community Farm, the practices they were doing is good. We have a sandy soil and organic matter is pretty high. Something like 5 to 8% organic matter is really good. A lot of soils will have like 3%. And that's, I think one thing is not using herbicides. Herbicides get your soils really clear of vegetation, but it also means they're not capturing the carbon they would have. So that's a benefit of our weedy soils, is it also keeps the weeds basically are kind of like an unintentional cover crop. So that's kind of a benefit of being organic you wouldn't think of. Also for soil disturbance, if you're disturbing your soil too often, like doing really intensive tillage all the time, that's also going to cause more carbon to be released in a lower soil organic matter level. So we reduce soil disturbance in different ways. So my master's was looking at reduced tillage. So if people have really technical questions, I can get into it. But basically, you don't have to get really complicated. If you are, rototilling your soil multiple times a year, you are really tearing it up and you're releasing more carbon into the soil. So any way you can reduce that is beneficial. And it's not a black or white thing. You could use that really vigorous machine that's tearing up the soil, but if you don't do it very often, the net effect isn't going to be that bad. Or you could do really vigorous disturbance to just a narrow swath. Or you could do lots of more shallow disturbances. But basically, whatever, if you think about being in your garden and you use the pitchfork, usually the soil has better structure than if you put a rototiller through there. Certainly than if you do a rototiller really frequently every time you put a crop. That better soil texture is associated with increased soil carbon. It's doing a better job holding that. So it's good for your plants and it's better environmentally. So that's one aspect. It gets a little complicated because soil disturbance in the spring helps warm up the soils, and we do want to be using our farm efficiently, creating more soil. So when we're making decisions that aren't black or white, that's one consideration. Okay, if I can disturb the soil a little here in the spring, but we get a big boost to production, then we're using our land more effectively, and that means more local produce is getting out there. And that's worth the trade-off, but then we'll be gentle with the land later, so we're not losing soil carbon, basically. So that's one way. Okay, another thing is, so for inputs for the farm, farms use a lot of plastic, organic farms use a lot of plastic because you can use black plastic to keep the weeds down. So one thing that we've been doing, we've used some biodegradable plastics in the past. That's kind of an area of active research, how great they are. And we use black landscape fabric that can be reused year after year after year. It's imperfect, but it does increase our production a lot, because anything black on the soil means it gets warmed up sooner, which means you get tomatoes a couple weeks sooner than you would have, for instance. You get eggplants, you get peppers sooner. And so it means we're able to produce more, and people are buying more local organic produce. So the reusable plastic is really worth it to us. Also, in terms of, if you look at the globe, if your production isn't efficient, you might end up clearing more land. If you're not farming sustainably and efficiently and effectively, more land gets cleared, and that's not great for climate change either. Okay. So another thing, I talked about this with cover crops are a really big thing that we do. Basically, when your land is in use, you have your cash crops that people are eating, we're selling, we're donating. And if not, preferably we have it in some sort of cover crop. Those cover crops are conserving soil carbon, and they're keeping the microbes in the soil alive. So that's sort of in concert with that, but it's something I wanted to mention, because they can also create habitat for beneficial insects, along with our flower garden, which has a lot of flowers for beneficials, and also letting certain crops like cilantro and dill, we give you all the leaves, but then when the plants go to flower, we'll keep them there so that the beneficial insects have a home. It's not doing anything in terms of carbon, but it's helping the critters that maybe are having a harder time with the stress of climate change. It's providing habitat for them. So we are always thinking kind of, how do we fit into the environment? How can we help other critters as climate change happens? So that's one thing. Another thing is conserving water. Drought has been an issue in New England lately. So that's another thing where there's different trade-offs. Drip tape is nice because you're not using that much water, and it's going, basically it goes through the tape, so it just goes next to the root of the plant. It does use plastic, and for us it is a single-use thing because the rodents will chew it up. They're looking for water too, and we can fix it, but it uses even more plastic to fix it. So it's not perfect. I'm not going to pretend it's perfect. I will say that our soil, keeping the soil healthy, it can hold more water than it would otherwise. And any sort of cover we can put on the soil, even when it's black plastic landscape fabric, that's still holding moisture into the soil. So there's a lot of different ways that you wouldn't necessarily think of that just help the soil keep the water that there is. But sometimes we do have to irrigate. And so then we look at, okay, how can we do it as efficiently as possible? One other big thing about using the land effectively, I'd say more reducing food waste. We're able to reduce food waste in a couple different ways. One, we have a CSA, which means we have fabulous members that are trying to be educated and not wasteful. And if there is food with some cosmetic damage, but it still tastes really delicious, we will harvest it and put it for the CSA and be like, hey, there's a couple insect nibbles in here. It's no big deal. Eat it. Typically on a farm, all that stuff has to get tossed. It's not up to spec. Anything for wholesale gets graded and they will toss it out if there's insect damage. So we really reduce food waste just with our fabulous supporters who are like, yeah, it still tastes good. Like it's totally fine. Another thing we did starting last year is making it a choice CSA where if you come to the farm a certain week at the peak, there might be 15 items and we say to choose 10. When people choose the 10 that they like and don't have to take home things that they don't like, that also helps a lot with reducing food waste. And if you were to take fewer than 10 items, whatever's left over is part of our buffer. It's going to go to donation. So we have these regular donations set up where I think about 4 times a week, we are donating to local food pantries or the community fridge. And so any food that a member doesn't take is going to get donated straight out. I think that helps reduce food waste a lot too. And our feedback from the donations partners is they don't get a lot of fresh produce. When they get it, it's not great quality. So it goes really fast. So I think it does tend to get used pretty well. So that's a real big thing there. Otherwise, I think, yeah, those are the main ways that we're trying to be a good steward of the land, be sustainable for ourselves, be sustainable for everyone else. I'll talk really quickly about how we're kind of approaching climate change. Basically, we're seeing clearly the weather's a little bit more unpredictable. Last year, there was hardly any snow cover. That's not great ecologically. It's not great for the soil. Weather is unpredictable, higher risk of drought. The drought increases pest pressure a lot for us because those thirsty animals are looking for a source of water, and our juicy vegetables that we're irrigating would be the main ones. And just generally, I'll say the main way that we're dealing with that is just increasing our resilience through diversity. We can't guarantee that everything will make it through the season, but we're growing a wide variety of crops. And our CSA members know we might not have exactly what they want, but that we'll have a variety. So even if not everything makes it, enough things will make it that will be a good CSA share. So diversity, I'll also say there's a lot of plant researchers that are trying to grow more climate resilient crops. And that's a big deal. We're always experimenting, trying different things. Does this new variety do better? Is this other green that they grow in a tropical region? Like, do people like it? Do we know how to grow it? Can we figure that out? So increasing our diversity and our capacity for resilience is really the approach there. So that's basically it.
Great, Sarah. There's so much information there. All right, I'm going to see if some questions come in. I've got one question, which is, what does a warming, that's obviously approaching, mean for longer growing season locally?
Yeah, so I honestly had thinking kind of positively about it a while ago, like if it could increase our growing season, it could be great. However, it's proving to be extremely unpredictable. Last year we had frost through the month of May. So the fact that it was so warm during the winter wasn't really helpful because I couldn't put tomatoes out at the normal time. In fact, I couldn't put them out till later than normal. And yeah, ecologically, a lot of the natives maybe are suffering to have a warmer season than, than typical. So it's tough. I was hoping it would be more useful, and maybe it will be to a degree that we'll have a longer growing season. Though also there's also new pests from the south that can't survive a super cold winter might be up here. So I think it's unpredictable and we still don't know. But I will say that nothing about this is new. And when I was in graduate school in like 2008, they were telling us at Cornell, they were like, we are telling people who are at the border zone for peaches, we're like, plant peaches, or you're just south of where they plant peaches, they're like, plant peaches now. So, and they were talking about how, I'm sure Judy knows this, how different invasives were going to really benefit because they were from warmer climates. So people have been working on this for a while. I mean, I think much longer than that even.
Yeah, thank you. Another question here. Do you select items for the seedling sale based on sustainability?
Yeah, I mean, I think broadly sustainability means that it should grow well in this climate and then you grow organic. I mean, we're growing everything organically, so it's not like we're growing things and spraying them. Basically, I'll say one thing is the way that we grow seedlings for the fields is to try to have them be kind of tough so they can take life. And so we're growing our seedlings for the seedling sale that way. If they are a cold weather plant, they get put outside, they experience wind and all of that just the way they're supposed to. We baby them a little more if that would be cruel to them. Like a pepper plant or something would be pretty upset about that. But yes, so the yes.
That's great. Here's a related question, somewhat related. Have you considered growing microgreens or other crops under controlled conditions like in a greenhouse?
Yeah, so the only heated greenhouse we have right now is at the Bradley Estate on Trustees land, and we're only allowed to grow on there starting in March. So they will not let us do it in the winter time. It's possible that will change in the future, so stay tuned.
Oh, great. All right, here's a question. Do you bring students to the farm, or do you have students on the farm? And if so, how does that work?
So last year we didn't have any students, but in the past we've had groups come, like a group of, I feel like we would have group maybe of up to 20 people that had, a teacher and 4 parents with them, and we kind of break them up into other groups. And that's something if someone's interested in, they could contact volunteer@brookwoodcommunityfarm.org would be the email, volunteer@brookwoodcommunityfarm.org. So yeah, we have a certain capacity. We are really production focused because we are growing a lot on a small amount of land. But if they're old enough and focused and have enough supervision, it can be a really nice thing to have them.
I just want to add in that the groups have ranged from, kindergartners or first graders all the way to a class from Curry College that came because it was a class on sustainability. And some groups come and it's kind of related to a service day. And so they get a little bit of education and then they get hands-on. And so as you all can probably imagine, this didn't happen in 2020, but 2019 and prior, we were working with a variety of groups. Could be a Girl Scout troop, it could just be a one-off visit. We had partnered with the Higashi School and they were bringing a couple of different groups of students, a very small group and 1 or 2 supervisors, and doing, kind of a very routine task at the farm. We had partnered with Canton. There's a small grant in Canton and we wrote for that, and they support Canton Public School first graders coming to the farm. And so we're also trying to get Milton on board with that. It just takes us getting out of a pandemic and then also getting maybe, those schools aligned and making sure it's first grade. It's just such a great, easy piece of the curriculum for us because first grade science and it's growing plants and that's what we do. We can find all the parts of the plants and we can easily keep a group of, even if it's a large group of first graders, we split them up into smaller groups. They send lots of parent chaperones, and then we have volunteer for each of those groups, and they learn about all the different aspects of growing a plant. And so the first grade curriculum is just, that's the one thing that we have kind of developed right now, and we just had to set it aside for 2020, and who knows how far into 2021. But yeah, thanks for asking.
Those days must be wonderful when you have young people around.
Yeah.
All right, we have another question that relates to scale, I think. So it's a really interesting question. Do you think that some of organic and sustainable practices that help combat the effects of climate change are scalable to large-scale agriculture? It's great to see how these work on a small community farm scale, but it would seem very difficult to upscale as much as needed for feeding a growing population.
Yeah, so I think that's a good question and definitely worth asking. I think some of the things that we do, like using the reusable landscape fabric, wouldn't make sense on a bigger scale. We would have to stick to the biodegradable plastic 100%. I think the things like with using cover crops and that sort of thing, that is no problem. It's really complicated into like, how can small farms feed the world? I don't think that every farm should be a small farm in the world. But I feel like it would have to be like its own series to get into that. But I certainly agree with that. Yeah, I think some of what we do what makes sense for our size farm, and it's nothing about farming means that any other farm should or shouldn't be doing it. Everything is so context specific. And I think when you're dealing with climate change, I think kind of what's gotten into this having climate change as an issue is kind of refusing to look at the context of like, we are humans taking action in ways that affect other things. So yeah, I think that's a good question. I don't have a simple answer, but I think some things translate and some things absolutely don't. I'll freely admit that.
Thanks. All right. Have you done much research on heavy metals in the soil and how that is affecting the growth of crops? What about terpenes and stressing the plants to allow them to grow using the least amount of resources?
So it's part of the standard soil test. They check for heavy metals. If we had heavy metals, it would be toxic for people, so we wouldn't. I mean, if you want, there's heavy metals in all the soils in Boston. When I was farming there, they're like, you have to put down landscape fabric and import soil on top of that. So that's not, I don't know about the Turk beans. I don't know if it's supposed to be that the heavy metals stress it so the production's increased, but I wouldn't really want to mess with it. I don't think members would want heavy metals in our soils.
Mm-hmm. So actually what is your protocol for testing the soil?
So soil testing is to make decisions about fertilizer and where to put certain crops. Certain crops have, like potatoes, like lower acidity, or they have increased susceptibility to potato scab. So it gets done every year.
Great. A question about how many acres Brookwood Farm has.
We say 5. Really what we're using is closer to 4, but it's about 5.
Mm-hmm. Great. I have a question about animals and their relationship to farming. I have read some books where farmers think that animals and their organic sort of byproducts can be helpful, but would Brookwood ever consider bringing animals to the farm?
So we're not on our own land. It's all owned by the DCR and the trustees. So that kind of thing isn't in our control. We also don't have any housing on the farm. And animals are really something that you need to be there very early every day. So I don't think it's possible with our current model.
Yeah. Sarah, have you farmed on a farm that did use animals, like even horses instead of tractors, for instance?
No, I haven't. And to be perfectly honest, there are farms that do that 100%. There are a lot of farms that make it look like they do it exclusively on Instagram and don't show the tractors.
Yeah.
So it's harder than it seems to get knowledge about that. Yeah, I think it's definitely super interesting. It's also another smaller scale thing.
Right. Yeah. Right. It looks like we might not have any more questions. Sarah or Kathy, are there any other things that you want to add to anything that's come up?
I think Kathy has something. Oh, Kathy's on mute.
Thank you, Sarah. No, I wanted to talk just a little bit about volunteers, and I think that Sarah and the staff and the board tried to work on how to keep people involved in 2020, and obviously as we head into the season. And and mostly some of those volunteers might even be on the call, but I just appreciate the fact that people came out in their family group or as an individual and were willing to kind of get some direction and then to go out and do that task. And, you know, I had some young people there one day and they were helping to fill these bags that you just put soil or rocks in, and it helps to hold down some of the stuff that they cover like the crops with, like when you're trying to keep certain pests off of a crop. You don't want this moth going in there and laying eggs. And I remember being out there actually a year prior to that with some kids and trying to get these teenagers to move these bags. And I said, have you ever heard of like, you know, there's like a exercise and if you go to a gym and they call it like a farmer's walk. I'm like, you're doing the farmer's walk right now. You have a bag in each hand and you're going to head down the road. Let's start taking them to the far end first, and then we'll start, you know, making the walk shorter and shorter. And so, you know, it's a tough job to say that you're going to go to the farm and pick rocks or fill bags, but it's so super important for us because, you know, if you have this super length of fabric that is covering a whole row of a brassica, you know, broccoli, cabbage, something like that. And as soon as those little eggs are in there, it's going to start to destroy the plant, right, Sarah? So they put this this light colored cloth, you might see it as you come to the farm, you know, over these hoops. And if you don't keep that weight down with a weight, you know, that thing's going to blow and flap. And then of course, obviously the bugs are going to get in there. So, you know, I was so appreciative of volunteers, especially last year, because it got us to meet some new people. It got some new people to, and old people to have a regular place to be and to feel safe about their interactions and to feel that they were doing something productive. And I think that, you know, we do our best to find places for people. It's not the easiest. I know it's hard sometimes for the staff to kind of change what they're doing, to incorporate maybe just one individual. But you know, we do what we can. And a lot of people found places last year, even folks we might have found late in the season. And some people are doing things just right now. You know, somebody is helping to reconstruct some tables. People are putting together labels and such for the seedling sale. And some people are doing, you know, simply, you know, kind of computer work for us. So, you know, everybody has a role. They're a member, you know, and they're just they're a paying member and they're happy that they're doing this at the farm. And then you've got folks who don't have the means, but they have the time. And sometimes we can incorporate them related to work shares. And then other people who are just happy that they have this, you know, day off from work or a certain day of the week that they like to come spend a few hours, and they kind of come consistently. And I think it really gives the farm staff a boost. Seeing different people and also, you know, getting your hands dirty. Not everybody's a get your hands dirty type of person, but we've met tons of them over the years, you know. And Mark, who's back on the screen, we can see his face, you know, has been involved with putting stakes in, taking stakes out, turning over sod when that thing was just a mowed pasture. And so it's developed into quite a place. I think we keep working the soil pretty hard. I know that everybody who's farmed there has tried to reincorporate things into the soil to keep it strong. One of the things we're trying to work on is trying to just get a little bit more land so that we can rotate or get off of a piece of the land for a little while and give it a little time with just having cover crop grown on it. It could be a year, could be a few years. But I'm just appreciative of the fact that it's public property and that, you know, we're hoping that more and more people understand that this is a property you can go to anytime. We don't welcome you necessarily inside the fenced in electric fence, you know, or poking around too much, because there's always a little bit of something laying around on the ground. But, you know, the overall picture of walking down that farm road and getting out into the back and coming back up the Maple Lane, you know, I think everybody's got to have that experience at some point.
Great. We've got a few more questions that have come in if you're up to it. One question I wanted to be sure to ask, Haley, who's 8, asked this question. How many plants do you plant each year?
Oh, that's a really good question. Just to give you a sense of it, some of the trays that we start the baby plants in trays and then we put them in the ground. The trays are 128 plants each, a lot of those trays. So, and then when we're seeding, we might see, it's all a bunch of math problems. We might see like 20 seeds per foot and there's 1,000 feet that we're seeding. So it's tens of thousands of plants, definitely tens of thousands.
Definitely. Yeah.
Somebody would like to know a little bit more about the seedling sale that you've mentioned.
Oh yeah. So we are putting together information for a COVID safe seedling sale this year. But it's looking like, Kathy, can I say that will be in person? It's looking like it will be in person spread out over several weekends so that we can have people sign out and stay really safe so that no one's having any sort of crowds or anything like that. It would just be like a very regimented sale but people can come and hopefully look and take them. And we grow a lot of variety is the big thing. So a lot of tomato varieties, you're not going to find them at Home Depot, and they're not going to have the thing is that the seedlings that come from the South sometimes have disease or pests from the South. That's actually how there was a tomato devastation in the Northeast in 2009, I think. They were like, oh, it was from transplants from big box stores. So I do think it is safer and healthier to buy local seedlings. And yeah, we grow them the way we grow our seedlings for the field. Organic practices, we use organic certified potting soil. They don't really ever need sprayed. We just grow them to be robust, and there's a wide variety of what we grow. So hopefully we'll have more info on that soon. We're still planning and we're planting the first seeds.
Yeah, great. All right, it's a question. Have you seen an increase in organic produce demand?
Like at Brookwood specifically?
It's just if you sense that there is a increased demand for organic produce.
I think so. I mean, there's been increased interest during COVID, and I don't know if it's because people are more interested in supporting local or whatnot. Yeah, I just know there's been an increased interest in Brookwood since the pandemic. Beyond that, I'd have to say I don't know what the surveys say. I think interest does increase.
Yeah. Great. All right, there's a question that relates to probably the greenhouses. What ability do you have to start your own plants each season?
We start all our own plants. The exception is there's certain herbs like rosemary you want to start from cuttings. It takes, you'd want to start it in the winter. So like rosemary and tarragon, we don't. Everything else we start ourselves.
Yeah. All right, here's a great question. Here's someone who's asking about better public transportation. So the comment is, I would like to see better public transportation to the Blue Hills too. How do we do that?
How do we do that, Kathy?
I'm just going to comment that just recently we have partnered up with a couple of the organizations that are represented here, plus a couple of organizations, urban organizations, Mattapan Food and Fitness Coalition and the Urban Outdoor, Mark, I will get it's a urban outdoor organization, and it's just trying to, we put in a group proposal to have a study done, because if you really look into it and you said, hey, I want to go from Mattapan Square down to, let's say, Houghton's Pond, there's a bus, and you can get off a trail side, and then you can walk the rest of the way, and that will take you about 40 minutes. So who's going to take a bus to Houghton's Pond? Unless they're, I guess, a really robust individual that just wants to walk the rest of the way. And another suggestion they have in the public transportation section, if you just kind of look it up, put a map, is that they suggest you take an Uber. So if you are under-resourced and you take the bus, and then you could probably get in an Uber. So all of these things we're kind of looking at, and we're trying to just, explore what effect we could have as a group of organizations to ask, larger organizations, like I think it's a metropolitan planning organization, just how it is that they could better facilitate public transportation through the Blue Hills. As otherwise, unless you have a car or you really like to walk a long, long way, you're not really enjoying what the rest of the folks are enjoying in the Blue Hills. So, and that would improve a lot of people's lives.
It's such a bummer you can't put your bike on the bus that goes down 138. That's a bummer.
and it affects some people who work at the farm, or people who are coming to try to do work at the farm, like the youth from the Vigorous Youth at Mattapan Food and Fitness Coalition. Transportation has always been an issue. But we recently teamed up, and maybe some of these folks will have, at least as a group, will have a bigger voice.
Great. All right, here's a general question about becoming more involved with the Blue Hills Climate Action Coalition. So maybe even Mark, you'd like to take this question beyond this webinar series, or would it make more sense to contact one of the coalition member organizations to see if volunteers are needed?
Yeah, that's a great question. The coalition is made up of organizations, and each organization, as far as I know, loves to have new people involved as members or volunteers. So I would suggest to go to the website, which is bluehillsclimateaction.org, O-R-G, and there are links on that website to all the members. We also have a Facebook page that has a link on the Facebook page to all the members as part of the coalition. And in fact, later this spring, we're going to be doing a kind of a tree planting initiative to plant 500 trees in and around the communities around the Blue Hills. And the organizations of the coalition will be involved in that. So if you're interested in that, get in touch with any one of the organizations that are mentioned before, or on the website or Facebook page.
Great. All right, well, that brings us to one last question, which is, did you do maple sugaring this year?
I'd love to answer that question, because we get it all the time. I think that if you search, maple sugar days, or you search Brookwood Farm, we kind of have some overlapping Google searching issues. Google My Business seems to be both us and the Brookwood Farm in Blue Hills. But so they just sent something out today. It came from DCR that just says it's canceled. It's been canceled for a while. It's just something that cannot happen due to COVID. And usually that event that happens at Brookwood Farm, which is through DCR, Mass Audubon's Trailside Museum, is thousands of people over a couple of days, and that's not happening. But as soon as we're out of this pandemic, I'm sure those folks would love to be providing education about maple sugaring.
All right. Well, Sara and Kathy, thank you for your perspective on local farming. It's been fascinating. Mark, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Sara and Kathy, for that. If your presentation made me remember one of my favorite food writers, Michael Pollan, who in one of his books talks about the fact that we get to vote 3 times a day for a sustainable future of our food production system. And for those of us lucky enough to have 3 meals, we can make that vote through the food choices, the food that we buy and the food that we feed our families. And I remember talking to a food economist or an agricultural economist once who did a study up in Maine, and the research was that if people committed to spending 10% of their food dollar on local producers, just 10%, the economic activity that creates in the state of Maine was phenomenal. And I always try to find a way in which I can source my food locally. You can't all come local, because I can't find, I'm sure if I did a lot of research, I could probably find local milk, but I try to spend a portion of my food dollar supporting farms and supporting efforts like Brookwood's that grow food sustainably. So again, thank you, Kathy and Sara, for that. I do want to just do a quick promo for our next talk. The series the title of this series is called Climate Change in the Blue Hills. And one of the goals of the series is really to showcase the work that members of the coalition are doing. So Brookwood tonight, 2 weeks ago, it was the Blue Hill Observatory. And then the next talk is Mass Audubon, who runs the Trailside Museum. And John Atwood, who is the Director of Bird Conservation for Mass Audubon, will talk about what are the projections for a warming climate and its impacts on bird migration. So we hope you'll join us for that talk. That will be on Thursday, March 18th, the same time. And we will be sending out information about that, how to link to it to get the Zoom link. So unless there's something else anybody from Friends of the Blue Hills or Kathy or Sarah want to say, last chance. Good.
I'll say something really quick. We are seeing in our greenhouse today, and we are going to be seeing in our greenhouse through, sorry, I'm
April?
No, we continue seeding for the farm through the month of, we have seedlings in there through August, basically, because our CSA goes till almost the end of November. And it happens by planting. And we have some volunteer opportunities that are slowly trickling onto our website. But it's just starting now. It's going to keep going. Things are going to be happening for a while. And we hope that you find a way to be a part of it, even if you just come down to the Blue Hills for a walk around the edges and the beautiful property.
And those links will slowly get on the calendar. So all of the seeding in the greenhouse is on our calendar, which can be found on the website. You'll see just a line that kind of continues to go through March and April. And the additional kind of more one-off cleaning opportunities are coming up on March 13th, Sarah, and then another one after that. And that's just like a weekend cleaning outside of the greenhouse, getting stuff up off the ground, raking up dead plants, and that sign up genius, if it's not on the calendar right now, it will be there soon.
Kathy, what's your website?
www.brookwoodcommunityfarm.org. And the great Instagram is Brookwood_farm. And if you want to learn about farming and watch amazing pictures year round, follow that, because Sarah does it, and she does it right from the tractor, or
Great fun.
Why there's typos, yeah.
Well, thank you everybody for coming tonight. I hope this was illuminating, and hopefully we can all get out and enjoy the spring weather when it comes, and get out to Brookwood Community Farm for at least a walk, if not a conversation with Sarah and Kathy and the farmers there. So again, thank you for coming. Hope to see you in 2 weeks when we talk about bird migration in the wake of global warming. Thank you and good night.
Thank you.